Hello and welcome to another episode of Queer Peer Reviews. We'll be reviewing queer media from good, bad, and ugly. As you've noticed, our host Jamie isn't here today because, well, she's behind the camera. But it doesn't matter because I'm also here with my co-host, Justin.
Here at Queer Peer Reviews, we'll be reviewing your favorites and not so favorites, films, TV shows, and video games that have either gay characters or queer themes. But today, we're not doing a review. Today, we have a list for you.
Wow. That's amazing. That's right. We'll be doing a top 5 LGBTQ plus representation based on the Cartoon Network TV show, Craig of the Creek.
The show is about a young boy named Craig and his friends' misadventures at the creek. The main cast includes Kelsey and JP, who are his best friends that hang out with him the most on the show. The events of the show take place typically at the creek, but all around the town that they live in. And it's really just a wonderful show.
It really is. And the biggest part of this show is inclusiveness and diversity with culture, race, disability, and of course, LGBTQ+. Now, this list isn't for ranking, but for showcasing, because we believe the characters are unique in their own way.
Let's start off the list with some of our first in representation. We have Tabitha and Courtney, aka the Witches of the Creek.
They are two goth teens we just mostly who hang outside of the creek, but yet when the kids see them, they call them witches just because how they dress up. So yeah, and the first part about these teens is that they don't mind the names because they sort of use it against the kids just to mess with them when they're bored.
They make a litany of like weird drinks because they work at a smoothie place and they call it potions. They do a whole bunch of card show magic tricks. They also do, I'm assuming, tarot readings and stuff like that as well. So it all kind of goes with the lore.
I mean, the best part about their relationship is they're straight up duos. So, every episode is always those two together, never separate. And obviously they're also in a relationship that was revealed later on in the show.
Yep.
But I also find the funny aspect between those two is that because they're called Witches of the Creek, they just played around with it. But sometimes when they do like fake rituals, they end up doing something and they play it off like, it's like, wait, was that? It's like, did we actually do that? And I was like, well, why not? So I think they're pretty much fun to watch when they're on the episodes.
Yeah, they always seem to enhance whatever like plot is going on because it's just like, what are they gonna do? How are they gonna add to the already like chaos of the show or the episode? Things can get pretty wild pretty fast.
And especially mostly like based on like Halloween specials too.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So I think that's great. And on to our next one, the Secret Keeper and George. The Secret Keeper is known around the creek for keeping secrets for other kids of the creek. He mostly has like this like big like hut where he just keeps bottles of like other kids' deepest secrets, stuff that would probably damage relationships and so, but he's in charge of keeping them secured. His real name is unknown, so that's why we just call him that.
It's a secret. There is a litany of characters in this show from all sorts of walks of life and
just say George. You're doing a whole intro.
And classes as well. So there's this other group in the show that's these kind of like elite kids that do like really extravagant parties, probably from like a wealthy family. And one of the kids that plays in that group, his name is George, and he's kind of like a butler. And he's very like well dressed and he's very posh. But him in later seasons and the Secret Keeper have a conversation.
And so their main interaction involved around this one episode where the Secret Keeper had to be a cat thief and break into an extravagant party where the rich kids were having their little get-together. And he runs into George, where the interaction between him and George seemed a little more kind and a little awkward-ish, but seems to have like sort of an interest in there.
Something that I actually really like in this episode specifically is the fact that the Secret Keeper keeps secrets, but a secret that he's not so keen on keeping is his, I don't want to say attraction, but kind of like crush on George. And this idea that he doesn't need to hide this secret as the Secret Keeper, I think is, really good. It's just like a really good message for, young kids to see that they don't need to hide this sort of thing or be ashamed or afraid of it. I think it's a really powerful message for a kid's show. And it's just a solid episode in general.
Yeah, I know. So I think that, like what that episode was just like you said, it helps, especially when because it's a kid's show. a lot of kids who also will experience same feelings as it was, because that's how everything is. When you grow up, you start experiencing feelings.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was a great, episode they did.
They also did a bunch of homages to classic Batman in there with the,
they
the
did.
punches and the.
As you'll see in the
little
clips we
text-
post
yeah.
in here, they do like little homages there.
The show is full of that, by the
Yeah.
way. So for any of you that like other shows and things like that, it pays a lot of homages to a lot of other kid sort of content, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and so at the end of the episode, though, Secret Keeper and George end up agreeing to hang out later on.
Up next, we have the Honeysuckle Scouts, or more specifically, the two best ones.
Raj and Sean.
And Sean.
I thought you were taking. They're not honeysuckles anymore.
Yeah, I know, but they were still the best honeysuckles. Raj and Sean.
Raj and Sean. Like, they're not even next. Oh my God.
First introduced as the henchmen of Xavier, the king of the creek. Well, the other side of the creek. Spoilers. They were commanded for most of the first, I think, season. They were.
They were like they were the henchmen of Xavier.
Yeah.
And so when we first saw them, they were known as the Honeysuckle Rangers, as Raj and Sean, and they were just sort of like these two pairs that were just trying to sort of get this map of the creek to King Xavier so he can rule over the other side of the creek. But we also learn out throughout that they're more loyal to each other than they are to the king. And you see more into the relationship that they really genuinely care for each other. And now, because they don't do this just for the king, they also do this for themselves. So they're, be in a better, I guess, creek living situation.
Yeah. Reminds me of Jesse and James from Pokemon. A little bit.
Yeah, right? A bit like that, right? And the difference is here, though, is that Raj and Sean, it clearly shows that they genuinely love each other.
Yeah.
And what even shows it more is that in the later season, after King Xavier's reign over the creek is like fallen, they become back to just being normal, just regular kids and just having fun there.
Yeah.
There was a talent show that happened, and I believe Raj basically did a homage to Elton John where he dressed up and played the piano, and Raj dedicated the song to Sean.
Yeah.
And Sean was just there supporting, cheering, and I thought they are definitely together.
Having this sort of like freedom in the creek allows kids to really express themselves the way that they've always wanted to. And even in some ways that maybe they might not be able to at home or at school, being in the creek and having other kids accept them for who they are was very, very powerful message for me. And I remember being young and also kind of hanging out in the creek. I didn't have a tight-knit group of friends that hung out in the creek too, but that freedom of exploration, even in like an outdoor space, is just something that really, you can really feel it in the show. And I think that's like a huge, huge point for anybody who wants to watch, anyone who's thinking of watching.
Yeah, so on the next of our list, this one's a bit different. This time we have more on the, instead of kids, we have older adults, which includes JP's older sister, Laura, and her girlfriend, Kat. So Laura, as I said before, is JP's older sister, and she's also a nurse. And most of the episodes that she gets involved with is just mostly to help with JP's many injuries that he goes throughout the show. But one of the most interesting aspects is that one of the times that she helps with JP's injuries or so is that when she's with her girlfriend Kat, which was revealed later in the show. It wasn't like explicitly like addressed. She just showed up there, but we knew that it was her girlfriend. And overall, Kat is also like a very chill type person. If you've seen her, like she's just like she gives me that like namaste vibes and all. And the reason why she's also very close to this type of top of the list kind of is her way she interacts with another of the main three, Kelsey, but that's for later on. But overall, I do love that inclusion with this with like the older adults couples, because what I see there is like, and the fact that they don't address it, they just show it, is just to make it feel like it's a common thing, it's normal, it's like nothing to like, they don't make it obvious.
I remember like a specific scene where they're I think JP had sustained another injury, as little brothers tend to do, but because she's a nurse and she's patching him up, and the girlfriend is standing there in like the back, and you can tell that they were like supposed to go on a date today or that day, and they had made they talk about that. They talk about having made reservations to go somewhere, and not being able to go because they had to stop to do this, but they talk about getting there and like her driving her car, which again, like that level of intimacy, letting somebody else drive your car and things like that, and having a history. They talk about knowing things about each other that only people who have a really intense history.
And they had a conversation where they knew each other from like as a young age too.
Yep.
They know each other from a young age. So this was a long relationship they have with each other.
Yeah.
And I think that's great. Like I said before, the best part with Kat is that she helps give advice to Kelsey, because Kelsey does she makes her own little fantasy novel that sort of reflects on her, Kelsey, and another friend of hers, which also leads to our next and last but not least on the list, Kelsey and Isabella, aka Stax.
Kelsey is the titular hack and slash, slice and dice swordsman of the group. She is, well, just the best. She's fantastic. She has the true heart of a warrior and a trusty steed?
A bird. It was a bird.
And Mortimer.
Stax, well, Isabella, aka Stax, is a book-obsessed kid who mostly hangs out at the library and tends to also do homework for the Creek and for the kids in exchange for candy. You know, she's basically the big bookworm. But the best thing with Kelsey and Stax is that they both have an interest in books, but mostly in the fantasy genre.
Yes. They tend to, or rather they find camaraderie and begin to overlap and spend a lot more time together over the course of the series, and as such grow a very unique and what would I say, maybe
friendship at the time.
But it's just a very what's the word? A very intimate bond, I would say. I think that's really how things go over the course, and it's slow. It doesn't just come out of nowhere. They slowly find things about each other that they mutually respect and that they really like, and over the course of like 1 or 2 seasons, they really come into their own as a duo, which is so interesting to see in a show like this, because typically, especially in episodic series, things don't always, you don't have that like development, but I feel like we're seeing that in more of more media these days, where you have shows that are still episodic but have that overarching character development, and I really feel like that really works for the show and really works for Kelsey's and Stack's relationship, because you get to see them in different situations and scenarios, and how their anxieties manifest and how they really help each other, really.
Right, and so because how far the relationship grows, Kelsey decides to write her own fantasy book, and which the 2 protagonists, which she believes she did unintentionally, are actually just her and Isabel as the 2 main protagonists in her book. And because of this, you know, a lot of people point out about the books, and she starts contemplating her writing. I was like, wait, what? It's like, wait, it seems a little too similar to me and Isabella. And she starts getting nervous, and it like gets really like what's the word? Insecure, right?
Panic.
Yeah, gay panic, right? She gets more insecure with her true self. And later on in the series, this comes back to Kat, Laura's girlfriend, where Kat talks to Kelsey about her book, and says that, you know, that Kelsey needs to embrace what this writing means, and this is not a bad thing. It's okay to just, you know, be your true self, and you know, and just don't be afraid to show. And so later on in that certain episode, Kelsey finally, you know, talks to Isabella with her book and sort of confesses her feelings to Isabella, and Isabella feels the same way.
Over the course of this list, there have been a lot of different moments in like certain stages for all different sorts and kinds of people. You have people who are just coming to terms with how they feel and what they're thinking, of people who are changing and transitioning. You have people who are, you know, firmly, you know, a lot, especially like older representation, like Kat, who's like an older person to these kids that is a role model for them in a way. Even the witches, even to some extent, are some kind of role model for the kids to look up through. There's the elders that live under this rock in the show, and they're seen as this like tight-knit group of guy friends that aren't traditionally like hyper-masculine or anything like that. You have non-binary mer kids that hang out in lagoons. There's all sorts of representation over the course of the show. And
so if you put in perspective, So put in perspective, this list is kind of like a tip of an iceberg. There's way more to this show that's like really, like each episode is really unique, especially even gives message, especially for the young kids who watch this, you know, to better understand more real life and, you know, just be okay with what stuff is around. So that's why, you know, made this little list here, because we'd be talking too much for the show.
Yeah, this
This would be a two-parter.
A two-parter if we really just broke it down. And we want you guys to watch the show and enjoy it. We really think that it's something worth watching.
And what other shows that are like this that you want to recommend?
Oh, there are a ton, but I'll try to keep it concise. I'll just keep it to 3. I think recently, you may have already heard, if you're watching this show, you may have heard of She-Ra. I personally think that it's a fantastic show, and it talks a lot about some of the similar themes, but also, I would argue, it talks a lot about trauma and how those things can be, transferred from generation to generation, even in found families and all sorts of stuff. It talks about loss and a bunch of other things that make the show really, really great. I think another show additionally that you might want to watch is a show that, can I say it?
Whoa, go ahead.
We might be reviewing later.
Ooh.
It's called Dead End, Paranormal Park, based on a book series, Dead Endia. So it's an interesting one. I won't get into it here.
We'll get into it to another episode.
Yeah. You guys should absolutely watch Owl House. It's still airing as of this recording, but it is pretty fantastic and it has a lot of, again, representation as well. There's so many different stories in there as well about found family and just coming to terms with yourself and the way that life is kind of going.
Nice. All right. So that was it for today. We do a list, and let us know in the comments if you want to do any other lists for top 5 representation or maybe something else.
Don't forget to check out our social media handles in the description below. We also have other information there on our upcoming projects, and leave a comment in case you're thinking or feeling something you want to let us know.
And we also have links down there below for the Trevor Project and other donations. Thank you for watching.
And we'll catch you in the next one.